Bloom Together, a series of podcasts of the EU Common Agricultural Policy Network stakeholders.
Fundamentally, we must remember that agriculture is not an industry, land is not a factory, animals are not machines.
Today, we're discussing how CAP monitoring and evaluation shapes better policy. Between 2021 and 2027, some €365 billion, that's around a third of the EU's total budget, is available for spending on the Common Agricultural Policy, the CAP. So it's clearly important to ensure that the money is well spent. That's where the CAP monitoring and evaluation comes into play. Now, the CAP itself has 10 objectives, which translate into a range of different measures to address member state needs. Objectives relate to things like dealing with food security, climate change, looking after the environment, protecting the quality of food and health, ensuring a fair income for farmers and targeted support, and fostering knowledge and innovation. Each EU member state comes up with a national strategic plan on how it will spend the money to meet the objectives. The 27+1 plans, there are 2 for Belgium, are due to be approved by the Commission by the end of the year. We're going to look at some of the core elements of the monitoring and evaluation process and hear some advice from a member of the CAP Network's Monitoring and Evaluation Helpdesk. Sophie Helaine is the Head of Unit for Policy Performance in the Commission's DG Agriculture, in charge of the EU Evaluation Helpdesk contract. As such, she's a leading EU expert on monitoring and evaluation. Bearing in mind that your audience is the CAP Network stakeholders, why is evaluation and monitoring so important? And what, in brief, are the absolute essentials they need to know about evaluation and monitoring?
Le budget pour l'agriculture est très grand et donc c'est important de s'assurer que l'argent a été... Listen, there are a lot of funds for agriculture, so it's important to be sure that the money is well targeted and spent efficiently to maximize the value added for farmers and also for citizens. Monitoring is to collect the data on the uptake of EU-funded measures and to assess whether the measures have been implemented by member states according to plan. Evaluation is to assess whether these measures are delivering to reach our objectives in terms of supporting fair income for farmers, ensuring food security, enhancing protection of natural resources, supporting growth in rural areas, and so on. Evaluation aims at improving policies. It can only be done based on evidence, using data collected in new member states by the relevant stakeholders.
We heard about the key ingredients of a successful evaluation on the day of the launch of the EU CAP network. What were they, in brief?
Alors, des données d'une très bonne qualité, high quality data, good methods and tools, sufficient time and resources, a dedicated and skilled team, stakeholder involvement, and the process tailoring everything to the purpose.
How can CAP monitoring and evaluation shape better policy?
Le suivi et l'évaluation peuvent permettre d'améliorer la conception de la politique. Monitoring and evaluation helps better shaping policies by showing to stakeholders what works and what does not work. It assesses the effectiveness and relevance of the policy in view of the needs to be addressed. Ongoing evaluation, meaning ex ante through to ex post, is a key element for successful policy implementation and design. As the implementation of the CAP plans, for example, it can help identifying possible ways for member states to improve policy design. It provides also the Commission with evidence to enrich discussions with stakeholders and demonstrate CAP performance, as well as to design policy proposals.
What is the role of the EU CAP network in improving the evaluation and monitoring process?
Alors, le rôle de ce réseau est de partager les bonnes pratiques en termes de conception de la politique. Its role is to share best practices in terms of policy design. That is mainly the role of the CAP implementation contact point, while the role of the European Evaluation Helpdesk is to support capacity building in member states, to help them carry out their evaluations, to disseminate useful monitoring and evaluation practices among the EU CAP network, to disseminate the results of evaluations, and to support the Commission with its own evaluation activities. More precisely, it can help stakeholders by continuing exchange of experience between member states and evaluators. It can enhance also the endorsement of evaluation outcomes by relevant stakeholders. It can accompany the switch in mindset within each EU member state that goes really beyond only complying with the rules and focuses also on the money being used to achieve better results. That's really the key idea underpinning the performance monitoring and evaluation framework, in other words, PMEF.
And what's your biggest tip to CAP network stakeholders regarding the CAP network evaluation helpdesk?
On compte sur vous pour nous aider à démontrer que la politique est performante et pour... We count on you to demonstrate CAP performance and to improve the policy.
What's the most important message for EU CAP network stakeholders?
Nous avons vraiment intérêt à démontrer tous ensemble. I would say that together we better demonstrate that CAP delivers, otherwise we might lose our budget. And that would be a really bad news for farmers.
The CAP Network's Evaluation Helpdesk is used by a multitude of stakeholders, including member state, national and regional policymakers, the European Parliament, farmers, NGOs and researchers. Stephanie Vella has a considerable amount of experience in policy and evaluation projects, including in agricultural policy. She is a member of the CAP Network's Evaluation Helpdesk, representing the geographical area of Malta and Ireland. Bearing in mind that our audience is the CAP network stakeholders, what in brief is the Evaluation Helpdesk and how does it work in practice?
L-evaluation helpdesk ilab rol importanti ħafna fost l-iktar rollijiet importanti li ilab il-helpdesk. So the evaluation helpdesk actually has a very important role to play. One of them is the actual publishing of the guidelines on evaluation. So the guidelines actually vary, so they can be sectoral, focusing on specific issues such as leader, and they basically indicate how the evaluation should be undertaken, the methodologies to adopt. Another important role which the helpdesk plays is that it also organizes good practice workshops, which allows for the sharing of experiences of evaluation methodologies and of these evaluation results, and it allows member states, particularly evaluators, to discuss these results.
Okay, and what is key in the evaluations as far as member states are concerned?
Mela, rigward x'inhu huwa l-iktar importanti għall-evalwazzjoni, naħseb waħda mill-iktar affarijiet importanti. Well, in my opinion, at least one of the main important keys in terms of conducting an evaluation is very good preparation, because an evaluation is not something which can be done instantaneously or in a very short period of time. So the first thing that you need is very good preparation, and one of those key elements of preparation is basically what is the evaluation question that you are trying to answer. And this is very important because when you decide what is the objective of the evaluation, what is the key question that you're trying to answer, then you can be more specific in terms of what is the data that you need. How are you going to be collecting that data? Is it feasible to collect data, or is it more feasible to apply qualitative techniques, for example? So a very key element is the preparation. Further to the preparation, it's very important to have a discussion with the stakeholders which are involved. What is the question that is required in terms from the stakeholders' point of view? What is the managing authority trying to figure out in terms of the evaluation? What do the policymakers want to know from this evaluation? So in order to ensure that you have a robust evaluation, basically you need to have good preparation on what you're going to try and answer. Then you need to invest very well in terms of the techniques, the methodology, which you're going to adopt, because you need to have a feasible approach also in terms of the data that is required. And then you have to make sure as well who are the stakeholders, who's going to be the users of your evaluation, to make sure that you reach the objectives which they require.
And what role does the Evaluation Helpdesk play to ensure that CAP monitoring and evaluation shape better policy in the future?
Well, the evaluation helpdesk, I think, plays a very important role here, because I think it ensures that the methodologies which are developed are approved in the sense that the helpdesk plays an important role in being a liaison kind of between the Commission and between the evaluators. So through the publishing of the methodologies, it kind of gives an idea of what methodologies are acceptable kind of in terms of addressing the evaluation questions. So in that sense, obviously, it plays a very important role.
What is the added value of networking and the CAP network for the evaluation process?
Mela, l-importanza ta' networking. The important role of networking really cannot be underestimated. So the fact that there's the possibility of member states not working in silo or evaluators not working in silo, but the possibility of networking, of discussing the methodologies, of discussing the challenges is very important, even in terms of discussing the results, because the results are not only in terms of how the Rural Development Programme or the CAP strategic plan is being implemented and what are the results in terms of that particular CAP strategic plan, but there are also lessons to be learned through this networking in terms of the different types of, for example, governance structures. What is effective for governance structures? What type of measures have been effective for some member states as opposed to others? So the fact that networking actually allows for this sharing of best practices, it allows for the sharing of challenges. And I think particularly within the context of member states, which are not homogeneous, which are very different to each other, the fact that you have a platform where you can discuss these issues, I think is a major positive element of the CAP network system.
And what is the biggest challenge in your best piece of advice for stakeholders, and which ones, when it comes to monitoring and evaluation?
So naħseb waħda mill-ikbar sfidi u forsi naħseb waħda mill-iktar affarijiet importanti. Well, in my opinion, I think the biggest challenge is really related to the actual monitoring, because you require quite a lot of preparation in terms of the monitoring. So you need to, as I said before, when actually preparing on what evaluations you're going to undertake, you need to ensure that your monitoring system is actually collecting that data. Because if the monitoring system over time is not collecting that data, then basically at the time when you're actually evaluating, if that is at the end of the program, you will realize that the evaluation question cannot be answered because you haven't been collecting data from a monitoring perspective in order to be able to do that kind of assessment. So I think the biggest challenge is really emphasizing the issue of getting evaluators and program implementers, for example, together at a very early stage, which is basically what the evaluation plan tries to do, in order to ensure that in planning the evaluation, you've already identified what are the tools that you require in order to answer the evaluation question, and ensuring that through the monitoring mechanism, those tools will be available, the collection of data, for example, will be available in order to answer the evaluation question at the end of the program.
What's the key message for CAP stakeholders with regard to all of this?
I think that the key message is that there is a need for very good communication between all stakeholders, in the sense that there's the need for communication of what the Commission requires in terms of evaluation. There is the need of the managing authority and the paying agencies, for example, to communicate what they are expecting in terms of evaluation. There's the need for the stakeholders who are actually the data collectors, the beneficiaries themselves, in order for them to actually raise their voice in terms of what data can be collected, because you can have very sophisticated evaluation methodologies which are very data intensive, for example, but it would require a cost on the actual people who are providing that data. So it's obviously a mix between the two. You've got to ensure that whichever evaluation methodology is adopted is a feasible one which provides a robust analysis. And I think in order to ensure that it's a feasible one which provides robust analysis, there needs to be good communication between all of the stakeholders which are involved to ensure that whatever evaluation result comes out, it's actually a robust result.
So that will hopefully give you all some inspiration and ideas for future projects and activities related to how CAP monitoring and evaluation can shape better policy. We'll be back with the next episode of the Bloom Together podcast series soon. Meantime, keep following us on Twitter and help us expand the EU CAP network by telling everyone about it and about this series of podcasts.